Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And tonight I would like to introduce a slightly darker angel than probably what we've talked about so far. There's been one or two others that carry some darkness around them, kind of like a cloak that they wear. But tonight I want to introduce you to the Angel of Death himself. And that is Archangel, or Angel, and I'll explain that in a minute, Azrael. Azrael's name literally means the angel of God or help from God. That's really comforting considering his more common name is the Angel of Death. So, Azrael is not a canon angel. He is not in the canonized Bible, not in our current canon or in the Talmud. He does appear several places in Kabbalah, but what brought him to the front in most Christian circles, and this is a little bit of a different turn than a lot of them, is his influence from Islam. In Islam, they have him as one of the primary angels, one of the primary four, actually. And he is in a lower choir of the angelic hosts, just basically called the angels. So technically, it's a little bit lower than the archangels, but that's not exactly true. He's referenced in literature, certain literature anyway, as one of the Grigori. Who are the Grigori? He was one of the Watchers. But interestingly enough, in this particular aspect, he held many other choirs and many other angels from all 9 choirs under his sway. He was a very influential angel. But the Watchers, when they had their moment, he was one of the few from my research who did not violate their oaths, and he stayed an observer, but he had to be removed from the Watchers because the Watchers themselves, especially the original class of them, were basically struck down. Several of them, as I've mentioned before, were able to redeem themselves. Azrael, because he didn't fall in the same way, he was actually returned to heaven, but his authority over the other choirs was reduced. So he was returned to heaven, but only as a base angel, not as anyone higher up than that. Those who fell under his primary authority were spread out and returned to their main choirs based on individual powers. So he kind of lost his place in one aspect. But as we go along here, you're going to find out that he didn't lose much, and he didn't have a lot in the modern concept of losing things. He didn't have a lot to lose to begin with because of his position. He was outside of the normal hold of the angel choirs. I just lost my place. In Islamic lore, Azrael is the master of the entity of death. So, in Islamic tradition, they're actually viewed as 2 separate entities. Death is a creature unto itself and held power that he could lull the entire hosts of the angels into sleep or stupor. Azrael was the only one that was exempted from the entity known as Death's authority and power. God appointed Azrael to be master of death and all other aspects of death. Death can only slay by the command of Azrael. That's the Islamic tradition. My personal workings with Azrael, because of the Kabbalah and my interest in that, there isn't really a second entity called Death, in my opinion, and in my research and in my personal experience. It's just Azrael. But Azrael is not just about death. So, we'll start off with his appearance. Azrael is described as cosmic sized, which sounds interesting until you get into the rest of it. He has over 4,000 wings. Not exactly sure why. 2 should be sufficient, but and this one was a little bit weird. He is usually described as having 70,000 feet. 70, comma 000. It's a lot of feet. Azrael also has eyes and tongues, more eyes and tongues than there are living humans in history. Well, just if you're looking at right now, that's over 8 billion eyes and over 8 billion tongues. The exact images of his description are nightmarish to find, if you can even consider finding them. There were a few that I did see on DeviantArt, but there's certain things that I just I'm not going to go down certain rabbit holes because it gets a little interesting. Generally, the image that you see of the Grim Reaper with his black scythe, that's a close enough description for what we are discussing today. Azrael is said to stand on the knife edge between heaven and hell. And if you go into the Islamic tradition, he also stands on the border of the fourth heaven in Islam. Not really deep into Islamic traditions, so I'm not too versed on all of that, but generally speaking, if we're looking at Kabbalah and modern mythology, he stands on the knife edge between heaven and hell, meaning the very border of who goes which direction. So he's kind of the judge, jury, and executioner, so to speak. According to the lore, before we humans had been created, the devil was free to roam around, and he was on Earth causing chaos. God needed supplies to make man. Now we're going with a more traditional view here. So he needed like clay and dirt, amongst a few other things. Azrael was said to be the bravest of all angels and was sent to Earth to collect the needed supplies, battling hordes of demons to secure these supplies. And he returned to heaven, and he was given the official title Angel of Death, or the Angel Who Conquered Death. Both pretty powerful titles. At that time, Azrael was given a roster of all living humans from Adam until today. That's more Kabbalah, modern mystic aspect of his view. So this particular register, this record that he was given, sounds pretty fascinating because it has each person's name from birth written in this ledger. Those going up, those who are becoming good, possibly even sainted, are circled in white, silver, gold. Those go down, meaning the people as they become more and more evil, more vile, things like that, they automatically get circled in black because he can see their histories. There are variations and there are things that change because destiny is not locked in, but the circle around your name changes as your thoughts. So there's something to think about. Interestingly enough, though, Azrael doesn't reap souls indiscriminately. It has been said in a lot of the lore that he is only allowed to reap a human life if the name falls from the tree that stands underneath the throne of the Father God of all. According to this aspect of the lore, from the day the leaf falls, Azrael has 40 days, 40, to collect the soul and send it up or down. Then he removes the name from his register because it's no longer a living human being. In some Middle Eastern traditions, they claim to have prayers and rituals dedicated to keeping Azrael at bay or just keep him completely away altogether. But if he goes to the Holy Throne, he can get the all clear, and you'd better hope that your name is circled in white. If he gets the all clear, you will be gently reaped if it's a white circle, and you will be brought up into the proper aspect of heaven that your soul has been placed in. If you're circled in dark and he has to go to the Holy Throne to get to you, legend has it that Azrael will be exceptionally brutal. If you've ever watched some of the very first Hellraiser movie, That's kind of where we're going with that. If you haven't and you're good with horror and gore, check it out. Old school movie. But that's kind of the image that was described, is he basically rends your body and soul into shreds. It states that he would lift the human from earth and tear the soul out of the body and then hurl the body back to earth and dismember the soul and throw it into hell itself. So there's that. Pleasant, right? But is this all that Azrael is? Is death, destruction, darkness, fear? Not really, but his authority and his position, because of his history, has him placed in that level of reality. Angel Azrael is actually, in my experience and from other people who've had experiences with him, he's a very benevolent, very compassionate angel. You wouldn't get that from what I just described, would you? No. But he actually is. He's beloved by the Holy Source from God himself. He is known to be the angel waiting for you at the moment of passing. The Grim Reaper, Azrael, whichever title you want, is not evil. It's a part of life. He's there to help guide you. Kind of an Anubis figure. He's a guide to the next life. He is the gentle guide for those who have lived a good and honorable life. He will help the person understand the process of the passing, and he is there to comfort the soul when it's time to cross over. Crossing over can be very sad. I mean, when the people who are left behind here on Earth are very upset by the situation, but sometimes the person passing is in a state of chaos and confusion, and they're very upset themselves. They really don't understand what's happening as they're transitioning. Especially if it was a quick transition, it gets a little bit more chaotic. If it was a slower, more gentle transition, like old age type thing, your soul tends to be a bit more, okay, so this is what we're doing. They go to sleep and Azrael's standing there waiting for them. So it's not always evil with him. My allergies are acting up. Just 1 second. So in this more benevolent view of Azrael, he is said to appear to saints or good souls before death. So before you even pass over, you may see him, to help them understand what is about to happen. Those names circled in gold and silver. If the person was to become a saint, Azrael would be a constant companion for the last period of their life. And most of the time, no one else would see them. There are some people who are a bit more intuitive, more psychic, so to speak. They would be aware of his presence, but it wouldn't be a fearful presence. They wouldn't quite understand, unless they really studied into it, who was there. He would be there to view their last breath. And then once they had breathed their last, he would gently collect the soul and bring it before the holy throne. So he's not all doom and gloom. And you can actually work with Azrael in your everyday life to help understand the bridge between the spiritual and the physical concepts. That's where he lives. It's that knife edge concept. He can help you release the fear of death, which a lot of people carry and they don't even realize it. I have personally called on Azrael to help understand the spiritual concepts that don't always translate into really any language because they're concepts. And Azrael can be very helpful with grief and grieving. It's something that the last few years especially have been a little interesting, and Azrael has been a little busy, but he's also been there to help people, and I have asked him for help during this as well, understand the concept of death as part of life. Because it is. I mean, we're never getting out of this alive. We'll just make that clear, at least not with these bodies. But Azrael can be a comforting presence when you're going through some of those darker times. He can help you work through your grief and guide you to understanding of the process itself, why that person had to go, and basically get you to a point where you can accept it. You don't have to like it. No one ever does. But you can get to a point where you understand and can accept that that person's time was up. Depending on what your belief system is, you can ask Azrael to pass on messages to the newly passed. Once they have been outside of that 40-day window, from most of my research, that's not his forte anymore, but up until that 40-day point, he can bring messages to and from. So anything outside of that, you'll probably have to find another angel, another spirit guide to work with you at that point. Archangel Azrael can help you in any time where your life is changing, where one aspect of life is dying and you have to shift into something else. In this aspect, he is the angel of transitions. So with major life changes, major events that are shifting, where you feel like your life is falling out of your control, not that you really had much to begin with, I'll be straight up honest, no one does, but there's times when it's just like it's a snowball effect and you're just kind of bouncing down the mountain. Azrael can help smooth the way. He can help you get more aligned with what's happening because of the transitional aspect of his energy. Azrael is an angel who can help those who pass go over their lives and see why they were going up or why they were going down. If you're interested in a review like this while you're still alive, you can always ask Azrael to go over a review up to today, to the now moment. And this will go over some past life stuff because that carries karma, getting you an idea of where you're at in the moment, what direction you're headed, major theme type thing. You cannot see the future. Point blank, you cannot see the future working with Azrael. You can review life from the past up to this second. With this review, he can help you assimilate lessons that you've completed but not fully integrated. Because a lot of times you'll keep repeating a lesson and you're like, what is wrong? I know this. Why do I keep running my head into this wall? It's because you learned the lesson but didn't actually put it into practice. You haven't brought that energy in and assimilated it into who you are. So you keep repeating a karmic pattern even though the karmic lesson has been completed. He can help you integrate that into your everyday life, releasing that pattern so you no longer have to carry it. You've already learned the lesson. Why do you keep repeating the problem? So this can be really helpful in the long run working with Azrael. I want to make one thing really clear here, because some people, if they want to review someone's life, that's on you. But you cannot call upon Azrael to review anyone's life but yours. To work with others, you can only ask him to comfort. You can send him to work with the grieving. That's it. He will not show you anyone else's history. He is not a encyclopedia where you can be third party coming in to help. No. He will help you understand you. Pushing him on that, I wouldn't recommend. He can be a little grumpy at times, but it's usually because we're not listening the first time. So just pay attention when he's like, no. His no means no. There is not going to be, well, if I word it a different way, you're not a good enough lawyer, no matter who you are, to argue with someone with Azrael's abilities, powers, and conscience. No means no. Don't do it. You can ask him to comfort those who are passing over, though, and that is a huge benefit. You can ask him to be with the family of those who are passing over. There's several deities and angels you can ask. Azrael is probably, in my opinion, one of the top on that list. There's a couple of deities that I use as well, but angel-wise, Azrael, Gabriel, Michael, those are the best ones to send to help people who are in the process. Azrael will help the person. Michael will keep them protected. Gabriel will help them work with their emotions. So those are like the triad of kind of the death watchers, if you will, but that's when they work best as far as I'm concerned. Other people have different opinions, and you can leave those in the comments because I'm interested in actually hearing what other people's experiences are. That's just been mine. So, Azrael can guide a person through the stages of grief. The primary list that I found associated with Azrael's guidance is the 7 primary stages of grief. So, originally, you're at the shock, the knowledge of the loss. You go into that state where, okay, I'm here. This is that shock. Like when medical terms, it's shock. Your emotions just kind of shut down. It's a mind and body defense mode. Azrael can be with you to be like, it's all right. Breathe through this. You'll be fine. This is what's happening. Hearing it and seeing it and understanding it do not come at this point. It is too raw. And so at this particular period, he's just kind of a comforting presence while you process it. From shock, you generally go into denial. Generally. Not everybody goes this direction, but generally you go into denial, which is, this can't be happening. This isn't real. He will help you understand and guide that process of, no, this is really what happened. This is why. It is real. Understand that this isn't always the end. It's not quite how things work, but this is real. This is the process. Then you go into the next 3 sections. You'll float through these. Not everyone is going to hit all of them in this order. Sometimes you'll go between 2 of them. Sometimes you'll ricochet back and forth between all 3. They can all show up at once. They can all go away at the same time. But the next 3, in my personal experience of being around people who are dealing with grief, these 3 are the most interesting because they're the hardest to escape from once you fall into them. We all go through them. Don't think you're above it. We all do it. But these are the 3 that are the hardest to break away from once you get into that pattern. So Azrael can help you process these 3 and move through them in a healthy way. These next 3 are anger. How dare you leave me? How dare God, Source Divine, take this person from me? This is just unacceptable. Rage, hate, vileness. It's a process, but it's directed at the person, the soul that is left, and generally at God, Source Divine. You're not going to hurt God, Source Divine's feelings. It's an emotional response, but this is not a place to stay. This is unhealthy for you as a person. Get it out. Let yourself go out into the mountains and scream and shout and carry on, freak out, get it out of your system. Anger does best when it's burnt off. Go out in a safe environment and burn it off. The next stage in the 3-stage triad of cycle here is bargaining. Why didn't you take me instead? Bring them back, take me. We can do this. We can figure this out. You're not going to bargain with Azrael, and you're most definitely not going to bargain with the creator of the universe. It's not how it works. That person's soul had a different mission than yours. Your current physical-bodied ego is trying to get its way. It doesn't work that way. That's the sad part. But again, Azrael can help you process this bargaining aspect. The bargaining and the anger at times are so intertwined you can't even tell them apart. Some people, it's a very distinctive line. Other people, anger and bargaining plus the third one, are so bonded you can't tell where one ends and the next one begins because it's such a constant circling flow. But this is Azrael's forte, so he can help process this and help the other person process it. The third one of the cycle 3 that literally you can get lost in is depression. Well, if you took him anyway, you won't take me. What's the purpose of life? There's nothing here. Why am I still here? This is just garbage. It's bull. Depression is insidious because usually if you cannot see where you're at with it, and a lot of people go through it. I've dealt with my own version of it for years. It's just part of life. But when you're dealing with it from a grief standpoint, it is exceptionally insidious because you can hide this. from other people. People closest to you are always going to know. Don't think you're going to hide it from your inner circle. But you can hide it from other people. The anger, the bargaining, and the depression can literally become such a cycle that you can carry on for years. I've seen people dealing with those three because they can't process it beyond that 10 plus years later after a person has passed. That's unhealthy, and that's where Azrael can really help to influence that person and hopefully guide them out of that dangerous triple cycle. Once you start to sort those three chaos nightmares out, Azrael will bring you into the testing phase. That's not him testing you, that's you testing you. And that is, how can I go on? The sun's come up again. I guess I still have things to do. How do I adjust to this? How do I live life without this person, without this entity with me? It's a little tricky, but this is where you start to heal. When you're in anger, bargaining, depression, you can't heal. There is no healing there. That is a cyclical process of getting you to the point of getting into testing where you can start to break free of that emotional heaviness. I'm going to say this, and I say this all the time to people, you never forget the person. You never let go of the emotions. You learn how to live through it. We're here to exist and live and thrive and love, carry on. Getting trapped in that cycle of anger, bargaining, and depression, you're not living anymore. You might be existing, but that's not living. So, from testing, you eventually will get into the seventh stage, and this is where you start to actually feel again. And that is acceptance. One day at a time. That person was really nice to me. The world still exists. When I say that person, it's like the waiter or that person who held the door open for you. Sometimes it's just a smile that you see on someone's face. So-and-so, the person who's passed, would have loved going on that cruise. That person would have loved that movie. I'm so glad I watched it in their memory. They would have enjoyed this restaurant, that book, that experience that you're having. You're bringing that other person's memory with you. Once you have achieved that point, that's when you can return fully into a living state. A lot of the times, they'll say that this should be a 6-month period. No, but you should be getting out of the anger, bargaining, depression stage within a year. Because when you start to cycle that beyond that, that's when you start getting into those unhealthy patterns. That's when you start to forget that life exists. It's when you start letting other things fall by the wayside. That's where Azrael's guidance really becomes important, because it helps you cycle out of that. Again, you're never going to forget the person. You're not going to stop loving them. But you can come to terms with the fact that they're no longer with you. And that's where those three, anger, bargaining, depression, can start to fade. Those are not healthy for anybody, so it's not something you want to stay there. Anyway, back to a little less depressing side. Another aspect that Azrael carries outside of that is near-death experiences, the NDEs. He can catch a soul, if it's not that soul's time, and return it back into the body. It doesn't appear that he helps with all out-of-body experiences, because you can actually trigger them yourself through meditation. But the near-death experiences where you start to go into the light, but then you get pulled back, that's usually Azrael being like, get back there, you're not done yet, no, move. So, that's one of the benefits of working with Azrael, is you start to understand that part too. Interesting little fact I ran across, Azrael is the patron of a zodiac sign. Not all the angels are, but he is, and it is Capricorn, Earth, one of the Earth signs. December 23rd through January 20th. Technically, it's December 21st, but we'll let that one slide. When you call upon Azrael, he may appear as a gentle older man. Usually when I see him, he's not quite that older. He's definitely has blondish, graying hair. And he has white or creamy robes. White or gray wings, most cases. He may appear as a white ball of energy if you only see an energy field. This shows the purity of his heart and his soul. Now, personally, when I've worked with Azrael, the robes will vary between moderate gray, like a heather gray, to black. The blondish graying hair is pretty consistent. Honestly, I've never seen him with facial hair, and that's, some people do see him that way. I never have. And he either is carrying a scroll, kind of like I see Metatron, or he carries a sai. Big sai. But he's never swinging it in anger. It's more like it's a walking stick for him, is how I usually see him when I'm working with him. So he does show up in some interesting ways. If you choose to want to work with him, and not everybody does because, Angel of Death and all, but if you choose to, you can use either a pure white candle or a jet black candle. The colors with him are pretty cut and dried. You don't want to use any grays or anything like that. Black or white, pretty much exclusively. You can use a small sickle or a sai on your altar next to the candles if you use those. You can also use a pure white feather. They say you can use a gray feather as well. I would say find a black one, just to stick with the theme here. If pure white, jet black. If you feel pulled to a gray feather with Azrael, that's great. That's just my opinion, is the black and white thing. You can visit the grave of a loved one and ask him to come close, especially to help you process the situation. Or sometimes it's just nice to be in the graveyard communing with the angels. It sounds weird, but it actually is very soothing to work in that aspect, because you're not doing anything. You're not working I'm trying to bring in this person to talk to him. You're just there. And you're existing with the angelic presence, and it's, like I said, very soothing and very calming to be in that state. So you can also, if you're dealing with the grief aspects, curled up under a blanket, you can simply ask him to come see you. You can ask him to really come in at any point in time, because his presence is comforting at its most beautiful state. He's not a scary angel. He's not really intimidating. He can be, don't get me wrong, but when he's just showing up to hang out type of a thing, he's not. The other thing is, you can call upon Azrael and you may not feel anything. You may not feel a shift. You may feel nothing. You can rest assured he's there. He does not want to startle you. He's not going to push the energy field around to be like, guess what, I'm here, boys or girls. It's more of, when you're ready to hear me, you'll hear me. Just know that I'm here. So his presence and his energy is exceptionally gentle, even with his exceptionally powerful presence and his tasks. His job is very serious. He's really just wants to be with us humans. He likes us. Sometimes I question why why the angelic hosts do like us, but he does. They all do to a certain extent. But Azrael really actually does enjoy our presence, and so when you call upon him, he will be there and be supportive of you wherever you're at in life. Whether you're using candles and all the rest of it, or you're simply just requesting him to be like, I'm struggling right now, this situation's got me really upset, help me. Literally, that's all it would take. And you may not notice anything immediately, but suddenly the tears don't sting as much. Your heart stops pounding. Your head can clear. That's when you know that you're in the presence of either God Source Divine or Azrael has stepped forward to help you start the healing process. So, that is pretty much where we're going to end this one. I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. Let me know if you've worked with Azrael or if this is something kind of new to you. And with that, I think we'll just wrap this one up. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video if you enjoyed this, and like I said, comment down below, let me know your thoughts, experiences if you're comfortable with it. Other than that, I will see you in the next video, and have a great rest of your week.